Allianz. Supporting all 32 counties through the Allianz Leagues.
Hello and welcome to the Throw-In Independent.ie's GA podcast in association with Allianz. I'm Will Slattery and delighted to be back in these strange times, as always, joined by Michael Verney. Michael, welcome.
How are you going? Well, I wasn't sure if we'd be back, but due to popular demand, we're back and the GA season is back, thank God.
Yeah, it's funny. I think the last show we recorded after reviewing, I think, round 5 of the league, actually we had John Milan on, and just before the end, he was like, lads, just before we go, one thing, do you think there's any chance of a stoppage because of the coronavirus? And we were kind of like, we were kind of like looking at each other laughing, like, geez, John Milan off on a bit of a mad tangent here, and then about a week later, the world has changed, and probably changed for good. But yeah, as you say, we're back anyway. What's the last few months been like for you anyway in this hiatus?
Yeah, no, it's been all right. Yeah, it was great to get back playing a bit of club hurling, to be honest with you. And I think that's been the general consensus from all county players and clubs around the country. They're delighted just to get back. Obviously, a couple of counties will be absolutely sickened, particularly all the county players going back now that didn't get to play their county finals or were waiting for county finals. Saw an interview with Brian Hurley from Cork this morning. Obviously, very, very upset. Their county final was called off on the Monday. He's back in with Cork training on Tuesday, which is a difficult thing to get your head around. I was chatting Eddie Brendan in Laois. It was the same scenario there with Clough-Ballacalla and Borris-Kilcotton. So it's definitely different. But I think, listen, the whole year has been different. It's an unprecedented year. People kind of realise that they just have to, as I did a piece with Eddie Brendan this morning in the paper, and I just said, like, COVID has just made managers have to be unbelievably adaptable and players have to be unbelievable. You have to be so versatile. You have to be willing to, just flick a switch almost on when a decision is made, or flick off a switch when a decision is made. But hopefully things will go smoothly enough over the next couple of months, because we all need it, really. We all need something every Saturday and Sunday, something to be following, something to be watching, something to be, digesting over the weekend and then reviewing on the Monday. And you need that conversation kind of starter. All people around the country all need it. So hopefully it's hard to see it going off unbelievably smoothly, particularly with what's going on in Fermanagh at the moment, with what I think is 10 positive cases. So that's probably going to be a common theme. So it'd be interesting to see how that's kind of dealt with as well.
Yeah, that's before we get into, I guess, some of the storylines and matches with the restart. Like, that's kind of the big thing coming into it, the Fermanagh situation and the knock-on effect that could have if something similar springs up in other counties. Like, at the moment, the GA have a very hard line that games will be forfeited if teams, are struck down. Is that? Do you think that's sustainable in the long term? If multiple teams start having to do that, as Ryan McMenamin has used the word, the integrity of the competition kind of gets a bit thrown into question.
Yeah, I tell you what, Ryan McMenamin also said it gets very, very interesting if it happens in a high-profile county. It really, really does. It gets very, very interesting. It happens with a defending All-Ireland champion, be it Tipperary or Dublin. Imagine Dublin's 6 in a row bid was undone because they were missing a load of players or something like that. I think Peter Keane said last week as well, the Kerry manager, that there's going to be an asterisk probably beside this year's championship anyway, and there could be, and there'll definitely be an asterisk beside it if there's walkovers or anything like that. Like, you have a potential scenario where you could win 2 games by a walkover. You could win your first round game, win a game or 2 by a walkover, or beating a seriously depleted side and end up in an All-Ireland semi-final. And God only knows what will happen. I saw Bernard Brogan saying as well, and I thought it was interesting. You would imagine there's greater scope for shocks and greater scope for maybe, a minnow to get on a run or something like that to happen. I always say that I always believe that winter conditions are a great equalizer as well. Games are more determined, I should say, by having a good free taker. You could, your tally could be 14 points in football and it could be 9 or 10 frees. That's probably the way it's going to be, despite the fact that they're going to be in really good pitches and really good venues. But winter GA is just slower. It's more of a slog. It'd be interesting as well to see whether players will be able to get through 75 to 80 minutes with such a short preseason, because they would have 2 or 3 months before they're going into the year, and then they're gradually going in. Big difference going from 60-minute games to what we've seen now with inter-county games, or 80-minute games basically now. So there's so many ponderables, and it makes it so intriguing and so interesting.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on some of maybe the off-field stuff there with the COVID situation, and then the preseason elements. To move towards on-field action now, and to move towards the Allianz Leagues that are returning. There's some interesting storylines. Obviously, we'll start with the one that I saw you follow the story late last night to independent.ie. Jim McGuinness spotted at Galway training, which I saw people make the joke that given that they had a much more expansive attacking style under Porrick Joyce in the league, is this a revert to type? But regardless of that joke or that throwaway line, it was very interesting to see him in there. I suppose Jim, obviously, since leaving that team in North Carolina, obviously maybe has been not involved full time. So it was very interesting to see him pop up there.
Massively interesting, yeah. I'd say it's one thing hearing that Jim McGuinness has done a bit with Galway or something like that. It's another thing actually seeing footage of him training with them or doing drills with them. And that standard drill, the one that he was doing, the one that was videoed, that's Jim McGuinness's drill. That's the drill at the start of a session. Because I remember he took a session awfully years ago, and I remember the boys telling me it's this hand passing drill where the sole objective is to get up to 100% and be absolutely basically wrecked after a minute or two, because you know what it's like to actually get up to 100%, and it sets the tone for the session. And it was interesting as well to see some of the Galway lads dropping the balls, and it looked nearly more like a junior B session or something like that, with lads making a mistake, but they were going at a seriously high pace. The backdrop then of the fact that Jim McGuinness and Porrick Joyce went to college together in Tralee and won a Sigerson Cup together in the late 90s. I'm hearing there's a possibility of a casual role with him in the setup. But I'd say that'll probably be confirmed this morning. Porrick Joyce is doing a media briefing in Lough George in their centre of excellence, so we'll probably find out a bit more then. But I think, you know what? I think it was the spark that the league and the championship needed, just to see that type of a thing, because even more so now than normal, it's even more covert and secretive now, because nobody really knows what's going on. You're hearing little things through the grapevine, and to actually see that, I think it was the spark that, in the week before championship, or league I should say, was starting back, that was just the spark that was needed to kind of set fire to the whole thing.
Yeah, because Galway, to be fair, we're one of the stories of the league. They're top of the table as it stands. If they win their final two games, they'll be crowned league champions, albeit two very difficult games starting this weekend against Mayo, who I'm pretty sure, if I've read the maths right and looked at the tiebreakers, if Mayo are defeated this weekend, they're almost certainly relegated to Division 2, maybe barring a miracle of results, or, given that I think they have the tiebreaker. They've lost to Monaghan, so they've lost the tiebreaker there, and their points difference is such that they're very unlikely to overhaul Donegal. So it's a huge game for them. I think they've been in Division 1 since 1997. Galway, Mayo, the rivalry over the last few years has been fierce, so we're starting with a really good fixture there.
Yeah, it's a great way to kick it off, isn't it? Galway could, be one step closer to winning a league title, keeping all the momentum going. And, there's no point in saying any different. They'd like nothing more than to relegate their neighbours. That's just the fact. That's just the fact of it. It's a great rivalry between the two of them. And the whole McGuinness angle has just added another kind of a little layer to that. And we're not getting a slow burner like we might normally get in the league. This is going in, and it's high stakes stuff. We don't know what teams have been doing for the last God knows how long, but everything will be on the line. Mayo will not want to be relegated from Division 1. They'll see that as a massive demotion, a massive step back, particularly with James Horan building. He'd want to be building in Division 1. So it's a perfect way to start. And that kind of McGuinness angle is one of many different angles and different things going on in different counties. Just off the top of my head, you've got Wexford going into Division 4 campaign with a new manager. You've got Carlow going into the league and championship now with a new manager in Niall Carew as well. There's so many different things. You have players that we didn't think we'd be talking about in 2020, probably the likes of Michael Quinlivan. You have them back in the county fold now as well. So there's so many interesting things. And I suppose the unpredictability of it all is when you just don't know what level teams are at. You don't know how much they're going to have done. You don't know how cohesive they're going to be. But most teams will be in the same boat because they'll have the similar levels of preparation. But it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting ones you touched on there that we might get to in just a moment. But just to round off Division 1, you have Donegal playing Tyrone this weekend as well, a dress rehearsal for 2 weeks' time. I'm expecting...
Well, just on that one, Will, that should be a phony war, right?
Yeah, I was going to say the phoniest of phony wars.
But how can it be as well, though? Because, can you sacrifice a competitive game for, not showing your hand? I don't know if they can. I don't think they have time to play that kind of silly beggars. I genuinely don't think they do, because I think you're better off going hell for leather and finding out and getting, that 75 minutes into the legs. I don't know if that can be a phony war. I don't know if either of them can afford to do that.
I'd be shocked if it was anything other than a very kind of easing their way in with an eye in 2 weeks' time.
Just on that as well, you have the potential. It's unlikely, but Conor McKenna is in training with them, so
Yeah.
he might see some action this weekend. You obviously have all playing links to their last All Ireland in 2008 have been severed with Colin Kavanagh retiring as well. So it just shows you there. It's kind of it's a new kind of a feeling to it. I do think both teams will go at it to some extent, because I don't think they can afford not to, really.
Yeah, well, Galway Mayo and Donegal Tyrone are both televised on Sunday afternoon on TG Car, which is great. There'll be two cracking games. The last team in Division 1 I just wanted to ask you about is obviously Dublin. Dessie Farrell's first year in charge. Very unusual season to be taking over. Jim Gavin leaving, then this long hiatus. And in the meantime, you have Jack McCaffrey stepping away, Jim McConnelly calling time on his career. There's been a little bit of turnover there. But I suppose he still has the strongest hand to pick from. But some of these things will definitely come, like the loss of Jack McCaffrey for one is massive.
Yeah, I actually think the loss of Brogan, O'Gara, and even Darren Daly, the loss of the leaders, I would say, in the dressing room, the lads that would definitely be driving standards, the lads that would be talking to young fellas in training, the lads that will be making sure the 15-a-side games are unbelievably competitive. They're kind of hidden losses that you probably won't see. People would look at and say, yeah, Brogan didn't play last year, Daly didn't really play last year, O'Gara didn't play last year. They'll just bring somebody else in. Don't know if it's as simple as that. The fact that McCaffrey is gone as well, they can replace most players, but if you're looking at an MVP for Dublin, you're looking at McCaffrey, Brian Fenton. I think they're irreplaceable. And Jesus, like for a manager coming in, like, and Dublin going for 6 in a row, you couldn't consider to have this sort of preparation. Like, it's been crazy. It was Jim Gavin was probably late leaving. Dessie Farrell was only really finding his feet when everything was called a halt to. And now he's trying to drag it all together again. Very, 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 very tough. Like, if they're ever going to be caught, you'd imagine to be caught this year.
Yeah, and then maybe just looking in some of the other, the other divisions. Division 2, as always, very topsy-turvy. Just 2 points separates third place from seventh place. And while there's still a bit of uncertainty over the structure for even 2021 regarding the Tailteann Cup, you still don't want to be in that trap door when it's swung shut at the end of the league campaign.
No, definitely not. I suppose as regards the league starting back again, I suppose Cork are probably the real winners, because it would have been a disaster for them if they'd had to stay in Division 3 another year. So it's looking like they're going to be up Division 2. Just on that Clare Fermanagh game, like, that's really, really interesting, because you don't know whether the game is going to happen, number one. Number two, I thought Ryan McMenamin made a good point as well. Like, it's one thing saying a substantial number of players have COVID and they're going to be back on this date, but like, are those players going to be anything like what they were before contracting it?
It's
like,
an important point.
It's not. You can't just say, "Oh, he has COVID, he's free to play in 2 weeks' time." Like, I think he was saying that a lot of them are really, really fatigued. It's a real messy situation, because I think Fermanagh's hotel in Clare was cancelled, or the appointment or booking was cancelled last week. Then on the Clare point of view, you have Gary Brennan back in. I wasn't sure if I'd see Gary Brennan in a Clare shirt again, just the way things were. It was looking like he was going to go travelling for this year. You have Jamie Malone back in as well. There's so many things, like, and they're fighting for their lives there too. So Division 2, Division 3 is really interesting. Then, as I said, you have Sligo, or you have Sligo in Division 4. They're looking like they're going for promotion. Then you have Carlow with a new manager, Niall Crew and Ger Brennan. Then you have Wexford with a new manager in Shane Roach as well. They were going well under Galvin before he left. So
what did you make of the Paul Galvin decision?
Well, by all accounts, I think he's had to relocate totally to the west, due to probably family reasons, and I think he's been dipping in and out of Dublin for work, but it's probably an awkward one. He probably took over in July of 19 and was there, a year and a bit, and never actually took charge of a championship game. Like, that's a stat that would be thrown around, or a fact that would be thrown around, that he was over Wexford or whatever and never took over a championship game. But it's kind of nonsense, really, because there was no championship games to take over. But from what I'm hearing, he's left it in a fairly good place, and it would be a seamless enough transition with Shane Roach, who was kind of his lead selector. He's taken over. Declan Brown, actually, the Tip football legend, is in as part of that backroom team there as well too. So it's amazing. There's been a lot of moving and shaking in backroom teams and in squads, and I think people have looked. See, it's different. Lads that maybe weren't available before, or couldn't mix club and county, really, really good club managers, are now afforded that freedom to get involved in county stuff. Like I see, like just for example, in Galway, Noel Larkin, who was a coach with Galway in 2017, he's now on the Westmeath backroom team, and it's looking like they could have former Galway hurler Davy Glennon involved as well in their setup. It's given lads a chance to get involved maybe in county setups that they probably didn't think they would be. And hopefully the league and championship will benefit from that. It's going to be really, really interesting. It's great. It's great because you don't know what you're going to see. It's so hard to expect or know what you're going to see from different counties, and there's no real trapdoor. While new managers might have a bit of a fool's pardon kind of for this year because of the way it's worked. Like Desi Farrell doesn't have that. Any of the guys in Division 1 don't have that. So it's going to be really, really interesting.
And Michael, while obviously the Football League takes centre stage and the Division 1 hurling league will be decided by a championship game between Limerick and Clare, there's a few other league finals in the hurling up for grabs as well.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, the 2A final is a really interesting game this weekend. Antrim play Kerry and Tullamore. Huge game for both sides. I believe Antrim went well in a challenge game against Tip a couple of weeks ago. They're fairly well drilled under Darren Gleeson, who was obviously the Tip goalkeeper, former All-Star. And they're coming up against the Kerry side, managed by Fintan O'Connor, who had a COVID case last week. So their preparations could be interrupted a bit too. That'll be an interesting game. Down and Derry and all Ulster clash in the Division 2B final, and Sligo and Leitrim in the Division 3B final in the Connacht Centre of Excellence as well. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. They're probably maybe lower profile games this weekend, but massive carrot for all those teams. Like Antrim or Kerry will be playing Division 1 hurling next year, so it's massive game for them.
Yeah, it's easy to forget, I guess, because it's been kind of a strange couple of months. But there's still a lot of league, crowns up for grabs. That a lot of teams that want to win, football and hurling included. A lot to look forward to over the next few weeks, and I'll be looking forward to recapping it all with you next week. Michael, thanks so much for joining us.
Cheers, welcome, Matt.
And that's all we have time for on the Throw on this week in association with Allianz. We will be back next week reviewing all the Allianz League action. In the meantime, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, SoundCloud, or listen on independent.ie. So until next week, thanks for listening and goodbye.